Welcome to Sports Beat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast presented by Big O Tires. It's Tuesday, January 7th, and on today's episode, previewing the Chiefs-Texans Divisional Round playoff game on Sunday, we head to Houston. Well, I didn't go to Houston, but we spoke with Aaron Reiss, who covers the Houston Texans for The Athletic. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Aaron covered Missouri for the Star before heading back to his hometown. We talked about the team's first meeting at Arrowhead Stadium won by the Texans in October. Also, we covered Deshaun Watson, J.J. Watt, and other keys to Sunday's game. After a break, you'll hear from Texans Coach Bill O'Brien, who spent part of his lunch hour today speaking with members of the media from Kansas City who cover the Chiefs. It's a weekly ritual. Andy Reid will speak to Houston media on Wednesday. Today, you'll hear what O'Brien had to say about Sunday's game and the Chiefs. But first, here's Aaron Reiss. Aaron, how you doing, my friend?
I'm very good. Glad to be joining you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had some time today. For our listeners who may need a reminder, let me take you through your career path here. You're a Houstonian. You grew up in Houston.
I did.
And could not find a college that could meet your intellectual needs, so you went to Mizzou for your
right.
for your journalistic endeavors.
As people do. To be challenged intellectually, yeah.
Right. And of course, you reached the peak of your career right out of college, coming to work for the Kansas City Star. And,
absolutely.
But then missed Texas and Houston so much that you had to return to the native land. And you have been with the Athletic for a couple of football seasons now, covering the Houston Texans. Have I got that about right?
That's all right. Yeah, it's been a good time, and I've been fortunate that the both teams I've covered obviously have made the playoffs, and have one of the most exciting quarterbacks in football. So could be worse.
Could be worse, and you do have one of the most exciting quarterbacks in football to cover in Deshaun Watson, who was just remarkable in the final, I would say, starting with about 3 or 4 minutes left in the third quarter on through the fourth quarter and the overtime period against the Buffalo Bills in the AFC wildcard round game on Saturday. He was amazing, but he was also amazing in Week 6 at Arrowhead Stadium when Houston came up and played the Chiefs, beating the Chiefs 31-24. I got to tell you, Aaron, that one of the storylines in Kansas City is the number of Chiefs who did not play in that game, who will be available for Sunday's divisional round game. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, what's different about Houston from Week 6 going into Sunday's game?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think for one, in that game, the Texans lost their rookie first round pick, Titus Howard, the starting right tackle. He partially tore his MCL, and then he came back a couple of weeks later because these guys are superhumans, and that's they're able to do that. So he came back a few weeks later, but he wasn't quite himself, and they eventually put him on IR. So since then, they've had guys rotating at right tackle, kind of a weird situation. They've had Chris Clark, who's more of a veteran, and then a guy who I think is a little more upside, Rod Johnson. He's also played some right tackle for them, and they'll change out series to series. It's not necessarily your turn then my turn, kind of just how Bill O'Brien sees fit. And so just as a result, I mean, the offensive line obviously is better than it was a year ago, but it has taken a bit of a dip in the later half of the season, just because they've had some issues there, and that right side is a little more exploitable than it was when Howard was there, because he was pretty good. I mean, he was out of Alabama State, and some people questioned the pick immediately after it happened, but he proved to be a pretty strong pick and have a pretty good rookie year when he was healthy. So that's one difference. And then the other key difference I would say is the secondary looks quite a bit different. The week after they played the Chiefs, they went to the Colts. They played in Indianapolis against the Colts, and Jacoby Brissett tore him up, and not only tear him up, but they dealt with quite a few injuries in that game. So they kind of then after that reconfigured their secondary. They traded for Garyon Conley from the Raiders, first round pick just a few seasons ago. They got him for a third round pick a week before the trade deadline. And he's been really good since he came to Houston, much better than he was in Oakland. He has 10 pass breakups since coming to Houston. He had just one during the first 7 games with the Raiders. And then they also picked up Vernon Hargreaves, another first round pick from the Bucs who cut him. And he hasn't been quite as good as Conley, but they feel pretty good about the top three corners they have on that team now. Bradley Roby, who suffered a hamstring injury in that Chiefs game that kept him out for a while, but he's healthy now. And then Conley and Hargraves, and and behind them at safety, they put their starting safety Tayshaun Gibson on IR recently to make room for J.J. Watt. And, he's kind of takes pride in being a tight end defender, so they won't have him against Travis Kelce. And then they lost their backup safety, Jaleel Addae. He hasn't been ruled out for this game yet, but he was hobbling around in the locker room on Monday. So if he doesn't play, it's going to be 38-year-old Mike Adams as the safety next to Justin Reed. And then the backup, if one of them goes down, is a guy named A.J. Mark, who is basically a special teams player. He hasn't played more than 11 defensive snaps all season, and mostly when he has played on defense has been kind of as a situational blitzer. So I think that's something that could be a problem for the Texans if they have more injuries. I mean, this Chiefs defense or offense obviously can cause a bunch of chunk plays really quickly.
It can for sure. Now, J.J. Watt, of course, played in the game at Arrowhead, but it was a couple of games later that he tore the pectoral muscle and was feared to be gone for the remainder of the season, including the postseason. But you know what? I tuned into that game on Saturday, and there he was, old J.J. Watt. And I thought his sack after the Bills went up 16-0, even though, or I thought it was 13-0, held him to a field goal, I believe, on that possession, but was a huge kind of momentum shift play. Did you get that sense as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and all the players said that too. I mean, the stadium just kind of came back to life. I think if the Bills score a touchdown there, you probably see some fans in Houston head to the exits, and just because that's kind of the way the fan base is here and stuff. But so I think holding them to a field goal gave them some life, and then Deshaun Watson kind of said, after the game, all we needed was some sort of spark, and that gave us the spark. And they went downfield after that, and they obviously, of course, they start their 16-point comeback, and that eventually goes to overtime, and then they win it. So no, I mean it was huge, and I think just generally the pass rush after that came to life. I mean they really got after Allen in the fourth quarter, and he obviously helped their cause a little bit with some boneheaded mistakes. But no, I mean his presence on the field just in general was massive for them. And in the fourth quarter, he played basically every snap, and he's drawing double teams, commanding extra attention, and freeing up other guys to make plays. And I think that's the biggest thing is even if he doesn't necessarily hit Mahomes on Sunday, and I imagine he will some, but even if he isn't, wrecking the Chiefs game plan, he at least can, create opportunities for other guys. And without him, they had the worst pass rush in the league. There's really no other way to look at it. They really struggled to create any pressure without him.
So I think Watts he's always a factor, and he will be on Sunday. Deshaun Watson, the play that he made where he, I guess avoided is technically the right word, but he escaped the sack and completed the pass to Jones to set up the game-winning field goal. That was just pure amazing on my part. And I heard Bill O'Brien say earlier this week, he as much as he liked the play, he's seen better from Deshaun Watson. So my question to you is, what's the Deshauniest play that you've seen in the 2 years that you've covered the Texans?
Yeah, I would argue that I would go with the same one that O'Brien went with, which is when he got kicked in the face and was adjusting his helmet and had one eye closed, and he threw the game-winning touchdown against the
Raiders, right?
Yeah, the game when Watt went out with his pack. I mean, so that to me is one. Another one, which is it's kind of funny to think about now when you consider the way that play to Taiwan Jones went in that overtime and two guys wrapped him up and he escapes and whatever. He threw a touchdown against the Colts that they called back, but he had the Colts had him down by one ankle. And he's kind of falling to the ground and hopping to kind of stay up when someone has their foot's caught under something and he's able to throw a touchdown to DeAndre Hopkins, and they called that one back and ruled that he was already down, which it was kind of a weird call, but anyway, I mean either of those two, I think it's just Mahomes is similar obviously in terms of the improvisational nature, but I think what's really amazing is just the amount of hits this guy can take. And he played in every game this year, and he was never really in doubt for any single game. And last year, obviously, he took a bus to a game. I mean, in Jacksonville, so he's incredibly tough, and his style for however long it works for him now, at least in terms of his body being able to hold up.
Yeah, he is amazing. I covered his college championship game against Alabama, and he was just incredible there. And the whole 2017 draft story's been written and rewritten, and we all know what happened there. But I think that the Chiefs and the Texans are very, very satisfied with who they ended up drafting in the 10th and the 12th picks that year. And look, this is just another in a series of games between the Chiefs and the Texans, and I would throw the Ravens in there as well with Lamar Jackson, that I think will define the AFC, at least at the quarterback position, perhaps for the first or the next few years. I go back to what I heard Bill O'Brien say. I thought it was an interesting answer when he was asked about it earlier this week, that he's not ready to dismiss the Tom Brady's and Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees just yet, but I just get a feeling that we're looking at the next generation of quarterbacks in these AFC playoffs.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I think Brady and Brees, losing early. I think that it only furthers kind of that narrative or that feeling, and it'll be really exciting to see these two guys get to face off again. Especially Mahomes being at full health this time compared to when they played in Week 6.
That's right. Hey, so because you were covering the Texans last season, you got to know Tyrann Mathieu a little bit. He has been an amazing difference maker for the Chiefs this year. What do you remember about covering him and his impact in the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of covering him, it was great because I'm sure you've seen this too, Blair. I mean, you can go up to that guy anytime after he's done kind of already a scrum with reporters, or any day of the week after he's already talked on Wednesday. He'll talk to you on Thursday, and he'll fill up your notebook with useful stuff and explain things. So, I mean, as a reporter, he's kind of like the dream in terms of someone you want to have on the team you cover. And then, in terms of the impact on the defense, I think tremendous impact. I mean, all the Texans defensive backs still speak highly of him and kind of what he was able to do here in a year, and really just in a few games. He was a leader for the team, and he was a captain, voted a captain during training camp. It was his only season in Houston. So I think that kind of speaks to what people thought of him here and the impact he had. And they definitely miss his versatility. And I think they aren't necessarily regretting that they didn't pay him that super high price, but I think fans at least miss him, considering that the Texans had the space to afford him and just opted not to pay him that much.
There you go. Okay. Aaron, so what's going to happen on Sunday? How do you see this game unfolding, and what do the Texans need to do to come out of Arrowhead Stadium with a victory?
I think the key for them is really getting off to a hot start, which is incredibly difficult. Been incredibly difficult for them all year. I mean, as funny as this is, that A.J. McCarron, who started in Week 17. He's the only quarterback to lead them on a opening possession touchdown this year. They otherwise, on other opening possessions, managed just 2 field goals the rest of the season. They've averaged, I think it's 0.98 points per drive in the first quarter. So they really get off to slow starts. You remember that game in Week 6, I think they got down 17-3 to the Chiefs, or maybe it might have been 17-0. But I mean, they got off to a slow start in that game, and obviously they were able to come back then. I don't imagine though that they can come back against this Chiefs team in Arrowhead in a playoff environment with a better Chiefs team, a more healthy Chiefs team. And if they get down early, then they're not able to kind of take advantage of what appears to be the one weakness in this Chiefs defense, which is defending the run. And if you remember that last game, Carlos Hyde kind of ran all over them, and just in general, the Texans used a bunch of RPOs and just gashed the Chiefs' run defense. So I think they need to be able to at least keep the game close the whole time. They can't really get down early, because if they get down early and get away from running the ball, then that's going to make things incredibly difficult for them. Yeah,
and I'll tell you what, as good as Carlos Hyde was in that game, the guy I was really impressed with on Saturday was Duke Johnson. He didn't touch the ball much, but when he did, he was pretty effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Texans fans have been kind of maddened all year by how little Duke Johnson has been involved, or his inconsistent usage, because he has been an incredibly efficient player for them. I looked this up today for something I'm writing. Of the running backs that are left in the playoffs, he leads all of them in yards per touch average on the season. I think he's at 6.8 yards per touch. And then in that game against the Bills, he averaged 11.3 yards per touch, 3 catches, 3 rushes. And that was his season high in terms of that. So he's been an incredibly effective player for them. them. And O'Brien, the thing is that O'Brien doesn't really view him as a lead back, even though he traded a third-round pick for him. Him and Carlos Hyde have split the snaps basically evenly. Carlos being more of the runner and Duke more of the guy catching passes out of the backfield. But O'Brien really likes him, not so much as a lead guy, but more of someone who can kind of give him versatility and game planning. And in terms of, a team like the Chiefs who defend deep passes pretty well, he can be a guy who can give you efficient yards near the line of scrimmage in the passing game. So I think this could be a big game for him because of kind of how the Chiefs defense is oriented. Although on the other hand, I know Juan Thornhill is out, and I wonder what that's going to do to affect the Texans' game plan.
So, Aaron Reiss, that's why we have you on, so I could borrow information from you like that. That was a great stat. So, hey, Aaron, great talking to you. I appreciate you coming on with us. And when we come back, you will hear from Houston Texans coach Bill O'Brien, who met members of the Kansas City media on a teleconference earlier today.
If your steering wheel has more traction than your actual tires, that's a big O no. Thankfully, for all your car's big O no's, there's always a big O yes. Now through February 2nd, buy 3, get 1 free on select sets of 4 Aspen Touring AS or Mesa AP2 brand tires with paid installation purchase. Big O Tires, the team you trust. Disposal fees extra and up to 10% shop fee based on non-discounted regular retail price not to exceed $35 where permitted. See store for pricing. Eligibility may vary. Not valid with other offers. At participating locations, no cash value.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/sportsbeatkc offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening.
Hey, Coach. Good afternoon. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm well, thanks. How surprised are you at how fast J.J. Watt was able to return, and also the fact that he actually had an impact on the game from a torn pectoral this past weekend?
Yeah, I've been around J.J. for 6 years now, and so it would be hard to ever use the word surprise. You know what I mean? I think he, his work ethic, the way that he takes care of his body, relative to everything, nutrition and proper amount of sleep and, obviously the workouts and things like that. So, look, I think at the end of the day, he did a great job in the rehab process, and he passed several tests to be able to come back to practice and then eventually come back to the game. And then I think anytime he's on the field, he's a great player.
And a two-part question here, Coach. What are some of the attributes that make for a good pass defense? And when you look at the Chiefs' pass defense now, how much of your criteria applies to them?
Yeah, in order to have a good pass defense, you've got to have really what the Chiefs have, and that's really, great guys that can rush the passer, and Frank Clark and Chris Jones and Suggs and those guys up front, and then obviously the corners and the safeties with Badger and Breland and the corners Fuller that can play coverage behind it, and then the scheme. Coach Spagnuolo's scheme is just a very, very difficult scheme to get ready for, and so it's a big challenge. And the Chiefs have all those criteria.
Hey, Coach, you mentioned Honey Badger. What did you learn about Tyrann Mathieu last year, and how difficult was it to see him lead the team for the Chiefs in the offseason?
Yeah, it was hard. He's a great guy. Got awesome leadership qualities. Really instinctive, good football player. Cares about the team, cares about his teammates. But that's the NFL. In the NFL, every team has a salary cap to deal with, and every player has the ability once they reach free agency to do what's best for them and their family. And we have a ton of respect for Honey Badger. he did a great job for us last year.
Bill, Pat Mahomes got some playoff experience, a couple games last year, and now Deshaun has a couple games under his belt. Do you feel like a quarterback playoff experience is more important than any other position, or is it just like any other position in that regard?
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. I agree with you. I think at quarterback, based on the speed of the game and, at every level of the NFL season, the speed of the game ramps up. So preseason to regular season to the playoffs to the championship game to the Super Bowl, the speed ramps up. So I think at quarterback, if you have that experience of having a couple playoff games under your belt, you understand what that is. And so I do think that's important at that position.
Anything you can point to in last week's game that Deshaun did maybe later in the game that you could say, all right, maybe this is because he has that little bit of experience under his belt at this time of year?
Yeah, I think that, I just think, basically the last, let's just call it 20 minutes of the game, end of the third, into the fourth, I think he was 10 for 11, passing game-wise, and he was doing a good job in a running game. So I think he played with great poise and great effort, and he was able to lead us to victory.
Coach, when you have a quarterback that can make the kind of plays that Deshaun makes with his legs, is that a difficult? I mean, certainly it's great to have that, but also sometimes he can run himself into some mistakes. What is it you have to do to try to maximize the benefit of that athleticism while also minimizing the negative things that can come about?
I think that's a really fine line. I think it's a great question. I think it's a very fine line. I don't think that you want to, and I don't want to speak for Coach Reed or, I don't think, I just should speak for myself, but I think when you have guys like Deshaun and Patrick, you just don't want to overcoach them. They have such great instincts. They see the field very well. And with Deshaun Watson, I mean, you might be able to point out a couple things, but this guy is, has got a huge heart, and he's trying to do what's best for the team. He's trying to win games, and you just don't want to overcoach that. You can point some things out and make sure he understands, what we're asking him to do for the team. But other than that, you got to let him go play.
Coach, Patrick said during the draft process that he thought he had a really good rapport with you and had some really positive conversation. What do you remember about Patrick and going through the draft and talking to him, and how have you seen the things you learned manifest themselves so far in his career?
Yeah, he was just a great guy. Had a lot of enthusiasm, really smart, really easy to talk to, loves football. We had him up here. I met him I believe at the Combine, and then we had him here, for a pre-draft visit, and just a really impressive guy.
Coach, I know the old adage in football was you had to run to win, period, at any time. That still seems to be kind of maybe a popular opinion of people, that you have to be able to run to win in the playoffs, to win when it gets colder, when the weather gets worse, particularly playing obviously outside. How do you react when you hear you have to run the ball to win playoff football?
The way that I react to that is I do have a strong belief in the running game. I also have a strong belief in making sure you're doing what you think is best for your offense versus what you believe you're going to see defensively. And so I think, in the end, it's more about, okay, we have a game plan. We go into the game. Okay, how is this game plan working? I mean, if you look at our game last weekend, our game plan going into the game against Buffalo wasn't working very well, So we had to make some adjustments, and we did, and finally we broke through on some plays. So I think it's, and so some of that involves running, some of that involves passing. I mean, some teams may not let you run the ball. It's very difficult to run the ball in this league. So I think you have to do as good a job as you can to try to stay balanced, and then you have to take what the defense gives you, and you have to, be able to adjust and be ready to make changes if need be.
Hey, Bill. I know you mentioned understanding or trying to get a grasp of Spagnuolo's scheme system, especially with these new players. because you guys caught them around week 6 or week 7, I believe, it was it appears that they were still trying to figure things out just as much as you were game planning for what they had shown. With that, how much of that do you think has changed from when you previously seen them to maybe the last 6 games obviously on their win streak? And how much of Tyron's role has sort of evolved or transformed from when you saw him on tape maybe in September to where you're seeing him now in December?
I think that over the course of a season, because it's a long season, that the season is divided up into kind of, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but it's divided up into quarters. And so I think if you look at the first quarter of the season, the second, the first 4 games, the second 4 games. So I think by the time you get to this point, any team that's left has done a couple of different things, right? They've improved a lot, and they've stayed relatively healthy. I think injuries are a big deal, and I think the Chiefs, for the most part, have done a great job of managing their roster and being healthy. When we played them back in week 6 or whatever it was, they didn't have Chris Jones. There were other players that weren't in there, and Tyreek Hill was just back from a shoulder injury, and so now you have a team that's fully healthy, and I think they've done a good job of that. I think that's a big factor in winning seasons, and so I think the fact that you're out there and you're improving every week, and then you're doing a good job of keeping your team healthy, I think that leads to different teams from October, let's just say, to where we are now, if that makes sense.
So we heard Andy Reid say after games, whether it was a loss or maybe just certain situations where the other team got the better of them, where he'll just say, "Yeah, they got us there." It's kind of a tip of the cap to the opposing team that, listen, everybody's good in this league. How often, in your mind, do you face that situation where you just have to, sit back and say, "Okay, they got us. They're good too." Obviously you don't want that to happen at all. The reality is, the other team's good as well. How many times do you find yourself, you mentioned Buffalo, happen to kind of change with what they did? How often do you find yourself just happen to kind of tip your cap and say, all right, let's get back to work and adjust and try to overcome it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that Coach Reid makes, and that's why he's one of the best to do it. I think that every week in this league is a huge challenge, and that you're trying to do the best you can for your team to put your players and your units in the best position to try to win and to try to play complementary football. And sometimes it doesn't work out, and so I think the biggest thing about our team this year is, we've had some games that weren't great, and then we've had 11 games that were decent, but they've all been battles. And I think that this team that we have here plays 60 minutes or whatever it takes. I think they play a next play mentality, and I think that's the type of mentality that the Chiefs have. Maybe there's a bad play during a game or whatever, but they're going to line up, they're going to play the next play, and you're going to be in a 60-minute battle. And I think that's what we are, and that's why it should be a good game on Sunday, because you've got two teams that, are going to fight and scratch to the end to try to win the game.
Hey, Coach, with Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson still alive in the playoffs, how much, in your opinion, are we officially seeing a changing of the guard or a passing of the torch among the older QBs to the younger crop?
I don't know. I think I've been asked that question a lot, and I have a pretty unique perspective because I was fortunate enough to coach Tom Brady in New England and now coaching Deshaun. So, I think that when you look at Brady and Breeze and Aaron Rodgers and Roethlisberger and all these great players that have been playing for 10, 15, 20 years, I mean, you're talking about players that have really done an unbelievable job of setting a great example for the younger quarterbacks in this league, Deshaun and Patrick and Lamar and everybody else that's played 2-3 years. And so until those guys actually retire, I don't think any torches are passed. You know what I mean? And I don't see those guys really getting ready to retire anytime soon. So I think it's just a unique league. It's a great league. And you have a great mixture of veteran quarterbacks with these young guys that are just awesome players that love football and trying to help their teams win.
Okay, thank you for the time, Coach. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for today. Links to Chiefs coverage can be found in the show notes on kansascity.com and the Red Zone Extra app. Thanks to Derek Donovan for producing today's episode. Leave us a review or comment where you can do that. We like hearing from you. And we'll be back on Wednesday for another episode of Sports Beat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.